Okay, perfect. One moment, just waiting for Andrew White to turn his camera on.
Hey, Galen, I'm here. You can hear me, you can see me.
All right, well, with that, I will get us started and introduce myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Galen Cranston, and I'm the Manager of Community and Government Relations at Char Technologies. I'd like to start with a big thank you to Mayor Ugolini, the City Councillors, and most importantly, the residents of Thorold for joining us this evening to learn about Char and meet our CEO, Andrew White. We actually requested the opportunity to host this voluntary public information center using the City of Thorold Zoom platform so we could dialogue with as many of the residents as possible and provide accurate information regarding our company. As we requested this platform, tonight's presentation should be considered outside of the formal City Council business. So thank you again for providing us this opportunity. In a moment, I will introduce and pass this over to Andrew White, our CEO, who will have a presentation followed by an open Q&A period until 9 o'clock or until we've answered everyone's questions. During the presentation, we ask that viewers remain on mute, and we ask that you write your questions in the chat, and we will answer them one by one following Andrew's presentation. Should we not be able to respond to all the questions by 9 o'clock, I will personally follow up the city clerk to respond offline. So before we get started and I pass this to Andrew, I just would like to quickly address some recurring inaccurate statements that have appeared on social media and have been emailed to Char. So first off, Char's Thorold pyrolysis facility is not and never will be an incineration facility. Andrew will cover this in great detail, the differences between wood renewable energy pyrolysis and waste burning incineration. We are actually different in every way to incineration companies, and we will not be generating fossil greenhouse gases or priority air pollutants. Also, forgive me not being the engineer. This is why I brought Andrew, so he can address all these in great detail. I have also read concerns about Char sourcing chemically treated wood. This is not the case at all. The wood fiber that we will be using to convert into renewable energy will be equal to the quality of wood fiber used in garden mulch. We actually pay for this wood, so we have to be extremely vigilant on ensuring the incoming materials are clean. If we accepted contaminated materials, our output would be out of spec and we'd be out of business. So that just is not going to happen. To the notion that we are a new company, our clean tech pyrolysis is actually the result of over a decade of collaboration with the Canadian Environmental Sciences institutions. We have a long-standing relationship with both the federal and provincial ministries that regulate the development of Canadian industry. And again, Andrew will cover this in greater detail. And then finally, we are aware of a specific list of questions and concerns that have circulated social media, and we will be addressing all of them in our presentation. I can also provide copies of our written responses to anyone who requests them through my email that I'm about to post in the chat. So please feel free to contact me. The door is always open, and we will remain transparent completely when dealing with the City of Thorold. So with that, I'm going to pass this over to Andrew, and we can get going.
Great, thanks, Galen, and thanks to the city for providing this platform, and thanks to everyone who's dialed in or who's watching the live stream. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to continue to introduce Char to the community. As we continue to develop the project, there'll be continued dialogue and conversations going on. And I also appreciate the opportunity to explain the project in a little bit better detail. With the public response that we've seen, it's apparent we didn't touch on the right points, or we didn't explain the technology and the project clearly. So I'm really hoping after this presentation and after answering some of the questions, we're better able to showcase the environmental and climate benefits of this project. And so as you see on the slide here, at Char, we talk about decarbonizing for a circular economy. And I just want to take a moment to sort of discuss those two terms. Decarbonizing, for us, it's all about reducing greenhouse gas emissions as quickly as possible. I firmly believe we are in the midst of a climate emergency, and we need every tool possible to mitigate this as much as possible. Circular economy is all about creating value out of low value materials. There's no reason that a clean wood waste should go to a landfill when we can add value to it and we can make a higher value product. So that's what I mean by decarbonizing, and that's what we mean about circular economy. So I usually kind of skip over our forward-looking statements, but I do want to take a pause here because I know this was an issue that was brought up, and explain what they are and kind of why they're there. And so the first bit is they're a legal requirement that I kind of don't have any choice about. And that's because if you look at this logo at the bottom of the slide, we are publicly traded on the Toronto Venture Exchange, and this is a requirement for a publicly listed company. If you go to any of our colleagues on the venture, you download their corporate presentations, they'll all have forward-looking statements. But these forward-looking statements aren't about does the technology work or not. It's all about commercial forward-looking aspects. So will the revenue and expense lines for a project be as we predict it will be, or will they be variable? Will projects I talk about wanting to do come to fruition, or will there be some reason that they don't? And so it's really, really important that we disclose to any potential investors that a lot of the stuff we're talking about in these presentations to communities is because it's projects we want to do, we're hoping to develop, but they're not there yet, and there's no guarantee they'll be there. And so, one shouldn't invest in Char thinking that the Thorold project, for example, is a done deal. We're in the process, and we're still presenting that opportunity. So that's why they're there. That's why they need to be there. So I'd like to take a couple of slides here to talk about the history of Char, who we are. Again, we're hoping to introduce ourselves to the community here tonight. So we do operate as 3 groups. So Alltech Environmental is our environmental engineering and services company. Alltech was actually founded in 1986, so has a pretty strong track record of helping move industrial companies to be more environmentally sustainable. So that's things like reducing their water and air pollution, increasing their energy efficiency, making sure they're meeting all their compliance requirements. Chartex Solutions is our engineering group where we develop advanced industrial clean tech. So the 2 areas that we focus on is clean water and water reuse. A great example of that is a project we have with Algoma Orchards. This is an apple juice, apple cider manufacturing company. And our system takes their wastewater, cleans it up to the point that the water can actually touch the apples in the processing plant again. So it makes it food plant quality water. We were the first ones in the world to develop a water reuse project like this. I'm confident in that because Coca-Cola said they were the first 2 years after. Alltech, of course, we didn't have the budget to market it quite the way Coke did. So that's what we do in clean water. It's all about reuse, reducing the amount of wastewater ultimately that ends up going to the sewer. Clean tech, high temperature pyrolysis, that's going to be the bulk of the presentation, so I'll skip that for now. And then the 3rd group is Char Biocarbon. And so as I go through the presentation tonight, I'll talk a lot about biocarbon as one of our outputs. This is the group that markets it, that finds the right home for it, that makes sure it's going to the places it needs to go. So that's who we are. I want to give you a little bit of a history on how we got to where we are. So Char was co-founded by myself and my former professor, Don Kirk, from the University of Toronto. That's us there in the first picture. So it was to commercialize research that I was doing while I was completing my master's degree in chemical and environmental engineering at the University of Toronto. So Don and I developed this technology and we wanted to launch it. So 2011 was when Char was founded. From 2011 to 2016, it was a lot of scale up work. So taking something out of the lab and building larger and larger systems. This picture here is a demonstration trailer we built that we towed around to different sites in Michigan, Ottawa, all over the place to continue the scale up work we needed to do. And as Galen mentioned, through this process, we were working pretty collaboratively with the environmental innovation community. I know Galen touched on some of the government areas. We've worked closely with Western University and their Institute for Chemicals and Fuels from Alternative Resources, the University of Guelph for land application of our biocarbons and biochars to show they have agronomic value. The University of Toronto through their forestry departments, University of Waterloo through some of their testing and analytical processes. And then CanMed Energy is a federal lab up in Ottawa, and we've worked very closely with them, primarily starting in 2018, when we started to work on our clean fire technology. So 2016, we brought the company public as a way to raise funds. It's very, very hard to raise money in Canada as a clean tech company, but the Toronto Venture Exchange did give us an opportunity to get those funds, which is what we needed to build our facility in London. Through 2018 to kind of 2021, I know one of the questions I was asked is, how does Char get a 1,000-ton order from one of Canada's largest steel producers? And it was not, kind of an overnight sale. It started in 2018. It started with us making kilograms of material, testing it with CanMet and the steel industry to make sure it worked, then making tons, and now making 1,000 tons. And so we are actively producing that order out of our facility in London right now. And then as we move forward into the future, of course, we're engaged in consultations with the provincial, local governments to hopefully move forward with the advancement of this project in Thorold. So that's kind of who we are, and that's a bit of the journey of Char from founding to where we are. And I want to take a couple slides to really talk about why I founded Char, why I've been with it for so long, and kind of why we see this as an important technology. And I think this slide encapsulates it very, very well. What these bubbles are showing is temperature anomalies in all these different countries. So red means it's above average, blue means it's below average. And you can see as we get into the 90s and then into the 2000s, it is clearly obvious that we're in a climate emergency. Like, this is happening, and this is happening and accelerating in the absolute wrong direction. And it's not acceptable to me. It's not acceptable to Char to not do everything we possibly can to mitigate this. This is our planet, this is our home, this is where we live, and this has been my life for the last 10 years plus, is how do we address this? How do we fix this? And I think this is one of the solutions. It's got to be a multitude of solutions. What we're working on is one of them. Now, this slide, I find it to be, honestly, both sad and frustrating, because we're not talking anymore about stopping climate change. We're not talking anymore about, it not happening. It's happening. You can see from this WWF slide, we've already conceded we're going to see 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. The fact that this is happening is frustrating, is devastating, is, any emotion on there. And so now it's all about, how do we keep it at 1.5 degrees of warming and not let it get to 2 or 2.5, where we see these devastating impacts. That's why we've been working in the lab, and scaling this up over the last 10 years. That's why all those years up until 2016, I worked 3 jobs to keep the company going, to develop it out of the lab, because I know this technology can have a real, meaningful, immediate impact to addressing our climate emergency. And what that technology is, how it works is important. As we're introducing ourselves to the community through the city of Thorold and the Niagara region presentations, you've got a pretty short time window to present, so we always try and hit on the highlights, but I'm glad we have tonight to kind of get into it a little bit more detail. So this is a picture of our facility in London, and there's kind of 3 key points here. One, we're turning low value residuals into some of these value added outputs, things like renewable gases to offset natural gas, things like biocarbons to offset fossil coal. And we're doing that with residuals. And you notice I say low value. These aren't negative value. These are still things we have to pay for. These are still things we have to source. And this is actually one of our largest expense items for running the plant. So very different from an incinerator or a waste processing facility, where the operators get paid to accept waste. We have to pay to get this material because we need it to be of a high enough quality to create the outputs that we need to create. It's also a zero oxygen process. So we're not burning the wood and the woody materials that we get. We're doing what's called thermochemical conversion. So there's no oxygen, no sort of flames are touching the wood. And what that means is the wood does what we call thermochemically convert. So it basically breaks down into solid carbon and gas. And because we're not burning it, we're not creating any fossil greenhouse gases, and we're not producing any priority air pollutants. We're not inputting materials and burning materials that would give you dioxins or furans or particulate PM2.5. Like, we can't make those things because we're not allowing burning to happen. It just won't happen in the system. And then it is self-sustaining. So we produce this renewable gas, the gas is cleaned, and then a small portion of it, about 10% of what we make, goes back to running the heating system. So we do need to create heat, but we create heat using this biogenic, not fossil-based energy source to keep our heat going to make our products. And when we talk about products, we always make two. So we're always making a solid biocarbon, and we're always making a gas. So on the solid side, on the biocarbon side and the biocoal side, I want to take a second to talk about need. And so from the quick facts basis, when 1 ton of fossil coal is consumed, it creates 3 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. So you can see in this table here, the Ontario steel industry uses 1.7 million tons of coal every year to run their processes. Multiply that by 3, and that's how many tons of greenhouse gas emission you have. So it's a pretty significant emitter. The other piece, though, that's important that perhaps not a lot of people realize is that solid carbon is actually needed as an ingredient for the chemistry to happen. So steel mills aren't just burning coal because it's a cheap source of heat. You actually need solid carbon inside these systems to create the steel. No carbon, the hot metal and the steel doesn't be made. So we've kind of got 2 options. You can use fossil coal or you can use biocarbon. And it's not just a steel issue. Nickel smelting plants, aluminum smelting plants, copper plants, they all operate under the same principle where they all need a solid carbon input in order to make that final product. So again, we can use fossil coal or we can use things like biocoal. And the important thing, of course, is that biocoal doesn't produce any greenhouse gas emissions. And so I do want to take a couple of slides to explain why that is and kind of the nuance there. And so this slide here is from ArcelorMittal's climate action report. We can share it. I just think it's a really good representation of how the whole process works. And you can see, let me open my laser pointer here. You can see that in the future, we'll be looking at creating hydrogen out of renewable energy. That goes into these electric arc furnaces. Now, you may have heard in the paper that Dofasco and Algoma Steel both got a lot of money to shut down their blast furnaces and move to electric arc furnaces. And this is great. Like, I'm very, very supportive of this. It does drastically reduce the amount of coal they would consume, but they still need some for that chemistry to happen. And that's where this circular carbon piece comes from. That's where we're taking biomass, converting it to biocoal through pyrolysis, letting that be used in the steel industry, and then recirculating kind of the CO2 to grow, whatever biomass is needed to then complete that cycle. And for us, it's all about doing everything possible to keep that fossil coal underground where it's sequestered, where it's not adding CO2 to the atmosphere. So we would call this process carbon neutral. We're not adding CO2 to the atmosphere, but we're not taking any away. We're just cycling it through. And so to kind of zoom in on that process, in this graphic, it's obviously agricultural materials, but it's the same thing for woody biomass. When that material is left, it will decay into CO2. And under normal, non-burning fossil fuel world, that's fine because new plants need CO2. The big problem is we're bringing sequestered CO2 in the forms of coal and oil and gas and all these things and adding to the atmosphere, which is a very, very bad thing. So instead of letting residues decay into CO2 naturally, what we're doing is taking them and converting them into things like biocoal that's used in the electric arc furnaces to produce the steel. It is emitted, but it's taken back out by the growth of plants or the growth of trees and circled again. And remember, the alternative to this is burning coal. It's not there's nothing else that can be put into a blast furnace or an electric arc furnace, a nickel smelter, an aluminum smelter, but solid carbon. So this is really a way to keep, like I said, those fossil fuels underground sequestered. So that's carbon neutral. When we say carbon neutral, it's about cycling carbon. The other option and what we can do is called carbon negative through carbon sequestration. So it's a similar process. We're using pyrolysis to make renewable energy. So in this case, renewable gas or green hydrogen. It's being used to offset fossil fuels. When you burn anything, you create CO2, but because it's from biomass, it kind of cycles through. But the difference in this graph is we're actually sequestering the carbon we make. So we're making a biochar that can be land applied, a biochar that can be used agronomically, and it can be stored in the soil. And because we're storing that biocarbon in the soil, we net reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that's where the carbon negative aspect comes from. And this is what we work on with the University of Guelph to show the actual agronomical benefits of biochar. And there's numerous. We don't need to necessarily get into them all right now, but primarily it's almost like putting a carbon sponge in the soil. It holds moisture, it holds nutrients. That has been proven by all sorts of academic research, and at the same time locks carbon into the soil. So we're net reducing carbon. And so with the Thor project, we're doing both. We'll be making both biocoal for offsetting fossil coal, and we'll be making biochar, biocarbons for soil sequestration for this carbon negative piece. So that's the solids, that's the biocarbon, the biocoals. We also always produce a gas, a renewable gas that we can use. And so first I want to share this excerpt from the Ontario Forest Action Plan. And in it, if I can kind of highlight this bullet point here, where gasification and pyrolysis are mature conversion technologies that use the controlled application of heat, steam, and oxygen to create renewable syngas, which can be processed into green hydrogen. The one nuance and subtle thing here, but that I really want to emphasize, is gasification is a technology that uses oxygen. Pyrolysis is a technology that uses zero oxygen. So I don't want that to get confused based on the statement. It's a government policy thing, so they have to be as succinct as possible. But I want to make sure that's really made clear. And how that looks sort of graphically is there's really only a couple of pathways to make hydrogen. This bottom pathway here is really how most hydrogen today is made. You take methane, you take natural gas, you split it apart, and you get the hydrogen, but then you're also emitting CO2. The two ways to get green hydrogen are through water and electricity, where you use electricity to split water into hydrogen and oxygen, or you use technologies like ours to convert biomass into that green hydrogen. And this is not, something that we're dreaming of or we're just doing in the lab. We're building it right now. So this is our green hydrogen project in California. What you see here is a picture of Hitachi Zosen and Nova's biogas plant. So they process organic waste, which is not something we do, but they do. And as part of that, they produce a fiber, a residue. And they produce 18,000 tons per year of that residue. And so our clean tech pyrolysis system is being installed there to take that residue and create biochar for carbon sequestration and to make green hydrogen for the California market. And this technology, over a number of years, has been vetted by Hitachi Zosen and Nova, which is a Japanese-Swiss company. When it comes to business culture and risk-taking, it's a battle between the two as to who is the most conservative and who is the lowest risk tolerance. So we obviously saw this as a huge win to go through the vetting process with Hitachi to show that this technology does what we say it's going to do. The other point is this has been permitting under California regulations. So it's much more stringent than Ontario. We have the APCD, Air Pollution Control Districts, the EPA, CARB, the California Air Resources Board, county, state, that we have to demonstrate that we're not having negative air pollution from the system, which we are doing successfully. Like I said, the system's being built and it will be commissioned late summer. So obviously we're very, very excited about that. But much like our permitting in California, in Ontario, we need to go through the Ministry of the Environment. Absolutely. We can't just build a plant without getting their approvals, their reviews. And as part of that process is additional consultation. That's not what we're doing today. We're not at the point yet that we've got a finalized environmental permit that we then go and consult with the community about. Today's just about information. Today's just about continue to introduce Char and to continue the dialogue and to hopefully answer any questions that you all might have after we're done presenting. So green hydrogen is one of our outputs. The other output is renewable natural gas. And I apologize, this slide has more text than I would usually put, but it's quoted from Emily Chung of CBC News, who did a report on what renewable natural gas is. And I think it's a really great summary. And that is, renewable natural gas is biomethane. So it's basically a methane. In our case, I highlighted and bolded forestry waste because we're not doing landfill, sewage, food, agriculture, none of that. Our environmental permits will be very clear that we're using forestry and wood residuals. But what renewable natural gas is it's basically the same chemically as natural gas. So that means we can put it in the pipeline to offset fossil natural gas. And how it benefits the climate is it displaces the use of fossil natural gas so that fossil gas can stay underground, stay sequestered, and it also captures some emissions. So, when woody biomass, for example, decays, it creates CO2, which I talked about. It also does create methane, which is a pretty potent greenhouse gas. So by taking that material and processing it, we're eliminating those methane emissions from reaching the atmosphere, where they have pretty detrimental effects to the climate. To talk a little bit about where renewable natural gas is and kind of why clean tech pyrolysis and woody biomass is such a critical aspect to get us off of fossil gas. I would kind of want to show this table here. Now, what we're showing is just a handful of regions, but it's demonstrating these regions all have renewable natural gas blending targets. So that is how much of their gas grid is renewable. So you can see from BC, Quebec, California, Oregon, Vermont, they all have different percentages. And then the last two columns are either petajoules per year or million MMBTU per year. The only thing you really need to know is those are both just different energy units. And to highlight it, this bottom sentence is from the American Biogas Coalition. And there's 157 operational biogas plants, similar to that one I showed that Hitachi built, where they're turning organic waste into renewable natural gas. All those 157 operational plants made 59 million MMBTU, which is the equivalent of almost 460 million gallons of diesel being offset, which is fantastic. This is great. But if you look at 59 million MMBTU, that's less than half of what just California needs. That's about what British Columbia and Quebec need. So there's still a huge need to get more renewable gas into the pipeline so we can stop using as much fossil gas. And again, just to make sure nothing gets confused, we're not doing biogas plants, but we do have the same output. We still produce RNG, renewable natural gas. It's just from clean tech pyrolysis instead of biogas. And this is the kind of the last slide on the renewable natural gas piece. But again, if we want to get renewable natural gas into the pipeline to offset fossil gas, the only way to really do it is by using woody materials. So again, we don't need to necessarily talk about what a petajoule is versus an MMBTU, but if we look at the scale on the side here, using agricultural, plant biomass, food waste, landfills, etc. This is for Quebec. Quebec can make 25 petajoules. Adding in some of these woody materials, they can get up to 140 petajoules. So this is why this type of technology is so needed, because it's really the only way we're going to be able to attain these blending rates to reduce fossil gas. And just to explain kind of the differences, non-merchantable wood is basically the part of the roundwood, so part of the tree after it's been harvested that can't be turned into 2x4s. Harvesting residues are things like branches and treetops that are usually just left in the forest to decay. And processing residues are things like chips and sawdust and planer shavings. So all of these three categories are being produced as part of sustainable forestry product production and forestry management. And so we're taking those pre-existing materials and creating much more value out of them. So we talk about creating value. For us, product quality is key. So I know I've mentioned it previously, Galen's mentioned it, but we do pay for our feedstock. It's one of our most significant costs because we need clean inputs to make these output products. Renewable natural gas to go into the pipeline has to be chemically equivalent to natural gas. So we can't take in material that's highly contaminated because we won't make quality natural gas. We won't be able to put it in the grid. The pipeline companies will very much measure the quality of the gas on a second by second basis. And so if we're off spec, that gas is not going into the pipeline, and that's how we make our revenue for this project. Similarly, for biocoal, you've got a huge amount of steel production, you've got a huge amount of nickel production, copper production. They need to see a very tight specification on the product they're getting. So the only way we're going to make clean, high quality products is by taking in clean quality residuals. And so the materials we're going to be using for this proposed project are really about the same or equivalent to what would be in a wood that goes into garden mulch. And I think one of the sayings that I'm fond of and I think really applies here is garbage in equals garbage out. And if we're making good products, we can't accept garbage, low quality feedstock. It's got to be meeting our specifications to come into the facility. So what does that facility look like? This is our phase one rendering. This is our plant in London that as part of an expansion, we want to move. I know some of the questions that come up is, why are you moving from London? Why don't you just stay there? And fundamentally, it's kind of two things. One, we are already out of space. My operators are trying to find rooms for super sacks of wood coming into the plant and biocoal coming out of the plant. We just need more space, and we certainly don't have the room to expand where we are now. Second, I'll talk a bit more about why Thorold, but logistically, it makes a lot of sense. The Thorold multimodal hub, to me, is a fantastic opportunity from a logistics perspective of moving materials. I think Thorold has the right human capital in terms of people who know how to work at these types of plants. I mean, the multimodal hub used to be a forestry operation in pulp and paper, and we're moving that from pulp and paper to renewable energy products. But a lot of the understanding of how the systems work will be transferable. And then our expansion, I know this is a little more conceptual, it's more of an engineering drawing, but really I just want to point out this bottom line here that it's about 9,500 square feet for this facility. So what does that mean in real terms? Here's a satellite view of the existing Thorold multimodal hub footprint. So you can see it here. This is the amount of space that we'll be taking, highlighted in blue, both the building and the outside area for the entire project. So for moving our existing facility and expanding it, that's how much space we need on the site. To kind of put that into perspective, because it's kind of a big site with lots of stuff going on. This in orange is how much footprint Northland Power is taking for their natural gas fired power plant. So we're a pretty small footprint. And like I said, this footprint we need when fully built out. So kind of why Thorold and Niagara, like I said, I think there's a really good opportunity to look at a facility that was a wood processing facility and convert it to a wood processing facility. Just instead of making paper products, we're now making renewable energy products. This picture is actually of the what they call the wood room on site. So this is the building that we'll be repurposing and investing in to redevelop for our needs. This big piece of equipment will be moving out, but that's what they call a debarker. So this was where the woody biomass going into the plant originally this was its first stop. So it's a great opportunity for us to build out that technology within this building, so to reuse it and to repurpose it for wood processing. And, like I said, infrastructure and the experienced workforce, all come together to make Thorold and Niagara really a great place for us to move. So with all that being said, kind of what's the summary? What are we doing? We're producing 500,000 gigajoules per year of renewable natural gas. So that's the average gas consumption of 5,000 homes. So we're keeping 5,000 homes worth of natural gas underground and letting these customers use renewable gas products. We're reducing greenhouse gas emissions by well over 25,000 tons per year. Now, this was validated by a program called GH Genius, which is used by Natural Resources Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada, the Ontario Ministry of the Environment. So it's a well-utilized, well-vetted program to show your net greenhouse gas emission reduction. So this is a pretty big number that we're pretty excited about. And the plant would process about 76,000 tons per year of this low value biomass. So with that, I did try and keep my comments relatively succinct as much as I could with while going into some more detail, because I did want to leave lots of time to hear from the community, to hear questions, to hear comments. So with that, I think Galen, you're gonna moderate for us, and I'm here to listen. I'm here to answer. Happy to answer any questions.
Absolutely. If we could pass the floor to Moto E. I believe he had a question earlier in your presentation.
Yes, I did. So I am in the Thorold South area, and close to where I live, there seems to be like a chamber or some kind of fume releasing pipe, and that's emitting, it's like basically almost like 24/7 emitting some kind of pink orange type of fume, and I needed to know why it's doing it and if this is causing pollutants to the oxygen in the area. And all the neighbors seem to be ignorant of what it is, and they suspect that it is toxic. And I needed to know if this is something that you guys have looked into, or if that you have discovered, or if you knew nothing about it. I needed to just bring it at least to your attention. And basically, like, I don't know how to describe it's a little bit north of the metal scrapyard in Thorold South. I don't know how to describe the address exactly of where it is, but it's within that area.
Right. Yeah,
Did you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you absolutely. It was cutting out a little bit, but I definitely got most of it. I would be honest, I haven't seen or heard any of that. Certainly, color coming out of a stack is never a good sign. From our environmental compliance permitting engineering group, we would certainly take a look at that. There should never be pink or yellow or any color to a stack emission. So I completely understand why you'd be concerned about it.
Yes, and the other thing is neighbors and people don't know what the purpose of it is. Why does it have to keep doing it? It could be having to do with the canals in that area, but I have to double check. What I can do is I could send you pictures. Would it be under the same email in the chat?
Yes, please direct them to me, and we'll definitely have a look and definitely respond to you in a timely manner.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so then they could be directed to Galen.
Yes, please.
Or
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Thank you.
Okay, if we could please pass the floor here to Liz. She has a question about our clean wood waste. And Andrew, one moment, my chat changed. She asks, to be clear, what is the source of the clean wood waste? Is it being generally generated locally? Can we be assured that no living trees will be cut down as a fuel source for this process?
So on living trees, for sure. Sorry, my blood glucose glucometer is just kicking off here. Let me turn that off so it doesn't make noise. We can absolutely assure that there's no living trees, and there's, you know, the primary aspect is there's just a lot of residuals from sawmills, from forestry operations, from the use of wood that we can tap into and that we'd rather tap into. The two principal sources of woody biomass for this site, the clean wood that could, you know, kind of otherwise be used as mulch, is generally coming from end-of-life shipping pallets. So the shipping pallets are kind of brought to a processing plant, they're shredded, they go through magnets to pull nails out of them. They are inspected before they go in, so any of the kind of blue or orange pallets we wouldn't accept, just the clean ones as they break down. The other option to supplement could be some of the bark from kind of the near north forestry operations. And bark is as part of, sorry, I shouldn't assume that everyone knows about forestry operations. So bark is when the logs come into, you know, the sawmill to make 2x4s, they first go through a debarking that basically grinds off all the outer bark of the wood, and that becomes kind of a residual for the sawmills. So it would be a combination of those two feedstocks.
Okay, Liz, do you have any follow-up questions to that, or would you like me to proceed to the next one? All right, I'll take that as we'll move on to the next one. Apologies if I pronounced this name incorrectly, but Faye Gang says, hello, Andrew. Thanks for sharing the great information. As a homeowner, I'm wondering why you picked the area so close to human habitation to build your facility when your technology is under development. What is the fail-safe of your technology, and would it be better idea to build it somewhere close to a landfill?
Yeah, great question. I mean, you know, there's certainly a couple of reasons, but, you know, I can kind of address it in two areas. One is, you know, the technology development. So, you know, well, we built our first plant in 2018 in London, and it's been running since then. And the closest home to that site that we're on in an industrial area in London is actually 200 feet. So there's a fair bit of monitoring going on to make sure that there's no emissions, because there is residential areas so close to our operations. We developed our technology. So maybe a step back to understand what Char's role is in the overall technology development. Our technology is really around the process. So the way to think about it is our technology is the recipe book. You know, are you making a carrot cake or muffins? And the kiln, the clean tech pyrolysis kiln itself is kind of like the oven. And so the oven that we're using has been in industry since 1984. It primarily was used in metals processing, but it needed to be oxygen free for those processes. So we've worked with the supplier of that kiln technology to adapt it to our needs, but things like keeping it airtight, keeping the seals in place, all the mechanical aspects of the technology. You know, there's over 150 of these kilns out there, like I said, since '84. So from that perspective, it is pretty well developed.
All right. If you have a follow-up question, please put it in the chat and we'll absolutely respond to that. Before I move on, Carol, is you related to this question that we just answered, or should I come back to you shortly?
Oh, you can come back to me shortly. Mine's more about jobs.
Oh, perfect. No problem. Well, I can quickly answer that one. Our facility is going to initially be bringing in 10 full-time operators to run the day-to-day on the facility. So yeah, we're really excited about that.
That's great. We do need more jobs, especially in our area. It's being hit pretty hard with the lack of industry.
Well, hopefully we can contribute to reinvigorating the site and bring more green jobs to the area. So my next question here is one I'm very looking forward to answer, as I'm sure there's been a lot of questions regarding it. So Andrew, can you please walk us through the regulatory process for the installation and specifically what reports will be made available as part of the public consultation?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of a bit of a stepwise approach. So the first part of the process is called an ECA, so an environmental compliance approval. So within that ECA, you kind of put together the entire package of here's under normal operations, how things go. Here's under, process upsite conditions, what happens, just to make sure under normal operations and under upset conditions that, we're looking at all the potential emissions. As part of that ECA process, we also do what's called air modeling. So there's a couple of softwares that the Ministry of the Environment kind of requires us to use, and we input sort of the location, all the environmental attributes, even things like the size and height of all the buildings around the site, to look at what comes out and what could basically leave the site. And so certainly as part of the ECA process, that data is available under Freedom of Information. Certainly we'd be more than willing to share it and sort of save you the time and effort of having to go through a Freedom of Information request. That's no problem at all. So that's the first sort of phase. And then as we move forward, we have to do what's called a screening EA. So an EA is an environmental assessment. A screening EA is basically, we need to look at all the potential impacts to the environment, to the soil, to the air, water. That's where we get into even things like how are we moving material in and out, and all that needs to be put together in a package and shared with the community as well. So through all of those processes, we're certainly open to sharing it. The screening EA we share anyway as part of the process. The ECA, like I said, could be addressable through a Freedom of Information request, but we're more than happy to save you the effort and share that as we have it available.
All right, I do believe that addresses Dave's next question about will we be requiring an ECA. So with that, I'm going to move forward to Erica's question, which thankfully we have an answer direct from the Ministry of Natural Resources Forestry. But Andrew, can you supply data showing that your process converting waste wood to fuel will cause less emissions than allowing it to decompose naturally? And that she understands burying organic material and having it decompose in anaerobic conditions creates methane emissions. So is there any data that we can share?
Yes, we did get a good backgrounder from the Ministry of Natural Resources here in Ontario. We can certainly share that. We can also share kind of how the GH Genius program works, what our inputs were, kind of what the outputs are, and those kind of together really help paint the picture. But yeah, absolutely, we can. I know we've shared some stuff from the Ministry of Natural Resources about the emissions related to it. We can certainly pull together the reports and make it so you don't have to kind of search as much. That's something we'd be happy to do.
All right, yeah, I can certainly also provide that as part of our pre-written answers to some of the questions that we responded to online. So happy to share that with anybody. Erica also follows up with questions about where our water will be coming from. Is there contaminants that will be in the used water, and how are we going to treat it?
Yeah, so we are kind of a net generator of water, and the reason for that is when you bring in woody biomass, it's wet, so it's between 30 and 50% water. So we create a little bit of water. I mean, it kind of evaporates out of the biomass at the temperatures we're operating under. We do then scrub the syngas, which is, a crucial piece. That water then gets processed and reused, recycled within the system. Any of the contaminants that we pull out, and contaminants in this case is primarily dust, because we don't want carbon dust in our gas. That dust can actually go back into the front end of the kiln system, where it'll be further converted into gas. So a lot of that gets reused within the system.
Perfect, Andrew. If you can address the next question, I'm gonna jump on a couple afterwards. But can the biochar produced by our system compete with price on current fuels?
Absolutely. So outside of the last week, where the cost of fossil coal has been pretty erratic, the key thing is when we look at carbon pricing, for example. You've got, with a carbon price of $170 a ton, which is what it's going to be in 2030, you've got a little over $500 of carbon pricing on top of the price of these fossil coals, which until last week were about $200 a ton. Now they're pushing $800 a ton, which we can be very cost competitive with. But if we look at let's call it December, before things got really wacky with commodities, $200 a ton for the coal plus $500 for the carbon pricing is $700. We can do much better than that. The other piece to remember is we're always producing two products. So we're generating revenue from the RNG, the renewable natural gas, as well as from the biocarbon. So the plant is always producing both products. And so we're not solely reliant on margins from the bio coal to make this economically viable. We have these two co-products that help support the financials of the facility.
Perfect. We will get to you, Moto, in a second. I'm just going to quickly respond to, are we looking north to Kirkland Lake, as we did a presentation to their council as well? And the answer is absolutely. This technology is very, very deployable using forest and mill residuals, such as bark, dust, and otherwise unsellable materials that traditionally ends up landfilled or burned. So it is a real liability for our Northern Ontario friends. And we feel, given the fact that Ontario has mandates to be shutting down a lot of the other sources of electricity generation facilities that utilize these woods in a burning capacity, we will be able to provide a much more environmentally friendly home that is not going to create these GHGs, but create more energy from less wood products. So I hope that answers your question. And yeah, we'll just quickly, are we willing to remove forward-looking statements? As Andrew explained, it's actually required of us from other sources of regulators. So unfortunately, we're going to have to keep those on all of our presentations. Andrew, I'm going to throw this one back to you. This is another question from Liz, but she's asking about London, that research about producing biogas by processing municipal sources, separated organics, industrial, commercial, and industrial waste, packaged food waste, liquid food waste, solid food waste. Are we planning on doing research like that at Thor at some point?
We have never run any of those materials through our high temperature pyrolysis kiln. So to kind of explain where our situation is in London, we're co-located with a biogas facility called Stormfisher Environmental. Stormfisher is our landlord. We have a small building on that site where we run our existing kilns. So Stormfisher takes in those materials through their anaerobic digestion process to make biogas. We do not take any of those materials through our process.
Perfect. Liz, if you have any follow-up questions, please post them and we'll get to them in a moment. Okay, another question from Erica. What are the emissions when biochar is burned by steel compared to other industries?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and the kind of nuance or subtlety that I hoped I presented, but I can definitely get back into, is that kind of the biocoal is consumed, and I'm not trying to avoid the word burned here, but just to make sure we're clear that it's not just being used for the heat, it's a part of the chemical reaction process that's needed to happen to make steel. So absolutely, when you consume any carbon, just like if you're using ethanol in your car versus gasoline, you make CO2. The question is it biogenic? Is it circular? Did it come from organic material that otherwise would have decayed and created that CO2 anyway? Or is it coming from something that's been sequestered underground and stored for thousands of years? So on the emission side, that's the difference. It's fossil greenhouse gas emissions versus biogenic carbon emissions coming out of that, be it a blast furnace, be it an electric arc furnace, be it steel mill, nickel, copper, aluminum, all of these heavy industries that rely on solid carbon for their chemical process to actually happen. But if that's not clear, I'm happy to kind of do any follow-ups around it.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, Andrew, on the second page of our presentation, the one that we supplied to council, I believe, a few weeks back, that went out to the residents. It shows the biochar sequestering carbon. Can you please follow up with that and explain the difference and how our biochar does actually sequester carbon?
For sure. So, as I was kind of saying in the presentation, we're doing two carbon products out of this facility. One is the biocoal and one is the biochar. So I know they sound very similar, but from an industry perspective, the biocoal is what goes into heavy industry. The biochar is what goes into soil. And how that sequesters carbon is it's basically creating a fixed carbon. So our biochar is about 80% fixed carbon. So that's carbon that otherwise would have gone to the atmosphere when some of these woody residuals decayed. And by turning it into a fixed carbon, we can land apply it, and when it's land applied, it stores that carbon in the soil. So it's almost like the reverse of pulling coal out of the ground. We're putting solid carbon into the ground. And that's what we worked pretty extensively with the University of Guelph on, to show that biochar actually has agronomical benefits. So it actually increases the soil value because of its ability to store water, so to hold that water in the soil, to hold nutrients in the soil. If you're really interested in biochar, there's a group called IBI, International Biochar Initiative. They do all sorts of great work on showing the agronomical benefits of biochar. So not only is it a way to sequester it, it's really a way to enhance soil productivity at the same time.
All right, Jack has a great question. Can we provide records of our air monitoring results from London?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
All right, I've put my email in the chat here. Please contact me, Jack, and I'd be happy to provide that for you. And as well, Erica, I believe we have addressed this question once, and I'd be happy to provide you a written answer to that. So if you just reach out to me at this email, I'll very quickly respond to that following the presentation. Before we keep going on the questions, I know Moto has had his hand up twice, so please pose your question. We're ready to answer.
Okay, so it's a two-part question. Somebody had talked about water, and I wonder if every house in Thorold has the same type of water running through their tap, because when I moved to this area in Thorold, the water tastes different, for example, than the Toronto water from the faucet. Or should each house be tested differently? Because it's also a hazard to the environment that I keep buying plastic water, and I don't know if there's like a solution to discovering if this water from the tap is drinkable where I live, and how do you find that out? The part B question is, do you recommend products? Anything we could do at home or anything we could buy to improve anything that has to do with environment? That the products like that we could buy or that we can find or get?
Yeah, so two great questions. In terms of sort of water supply in Thor, that, to be honest, I don't know. We're getting processed water for our cooling needs and the like from the Thor Multi-Modal hub. So that's part of our kind of lease agreement. Certainly there are tests you can do. You can hire companies to do those tests. Generally, Ontario municipal water is some of the highest quality in the world. It was very unfortunate that the Walkerton kind of tragedy had to happen for us to get there, but now Ontario municipal water is some of the most highly tested and regulated drinking water in the world. So I'm not trying to diminish your question, your concern, but there is a lot of testing that goes on. But yeah, absolutely. If there's concern, there are certainly people who can do that testing. From a product side, my kind of fundamental environmental concepts are around life cycles. So how do we reduce the movement of materials? So it's things like all of our hand soap that we use in the house. We buy these little discs that you can dissolve in water, and that creates hand soap instead of having to move all this liquid soap in plastic containers all the way around. Similarly for laundry detergent, anything like that. So for me, I don't know if I would necessarily recommend products, but I would suggest kind of looking at sort of the life cycle of how does that product get from where it's made to where it needs to go. Moving water is very, very expensive. So you have a big tub of laundry detergent. It takes a lot of energy. And if it's in a truck, a lot of diesel fuel to move that water from where it was produced to your home. So that's sort of my general view. I think there's lots of things that we can do, and it doesn't have to be everyone do one thing or do another thing. But that's how I usually look at environment from a home perspective.
Well, thank you. If your company is also offering environmental related jobs, I would highly encourage you to also consider products that you promote or that you offer or sell, if that's ever be an option.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, we're pretty industrially focused. So on kind of water, it's a food and beverage company. How do we help recycle, reuse the water that they're producing? But I appreciate the comment for sure, and we can look at that from a industrial client base.
I'll just jump in here with a quick recommendation. I'm an extremely avid green thumb. I've been growing food and garden my whole life. Yeah, definitely make sure you're composting all your organics at home, because it significantly helps make better tomatoes. And we could all use, fresher tomatoes right from the vine. But that aside, Dave has asked us, is there any vapor emissions from our process?
No, it's all, I mean, to kind of go into vapor, there will be some water vapor if that's kind of what the question is coming from. If it's sort of other, vapors, then the answer is no. It's a closed system. We go through a scrubber, we go through an upgrader, and it goes into the pipeline. So at no point is there sort of an exposure to the environment from the gases we produce. So whichever the vapors we're talking about, if it's anything from the gas side, the answer is no. If it's water from cooling or from biomass being dried, there's a little bit of water vapor from cooling.
All right. We have, I believe, a statement rather than a question from Matt, that the multimodal hub and the property that we're proposing to move into filters its own water. Andrew, can you just confirm that before we move forward?
They do have a water plant on site, yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to read part of this one, but you as the engineer should probably read the second half just to yourself as I do. JB says, to get a sense of scale locally, can you please speak to the quantity of RNG being produced in each phase we have planned versus the gas consumed by the Thor gas plant?
Yeah, so, oh, I see the rest of it here. So let's see. I know, from what I know about the Thor gas plant, is that it operates intermittently. I think it's dispatchable. I don't know sort of a whole lot about its operation. We'll be producing, oh, sorry, you do go into that. Sorry, I didn't read the whole question yet. We do plan to produce 500,000 gigajoules per year of energy. So if you'll permit me, I usually have a little calculator I can pull up that converts cubic meters to gigajoules, and then we can try and get that question answered.
This is why I have to bring an engineer everywhere with me in case these questions come
Okay,
up.
and then there you go. Let me just pull up my calculator. I can't quite do this one in my head. So if we're 80 million, sorry, 83 cubic meters times. So it consumes about 3 million gigajoules a year, and we're 500,000 gigajoules per year. So we're certainly not producing as much as that particular plant consumes, but it's certainly a piece of it.
Okay, we have run to the end of the written questions. Always happy to answer more. So I believe Moto has his hand up again. We'll turn our attention to him.
Okay, I just think it's very important to address for example, I know that in Pickering, there's I think it's called a nuclear power plant, and the same is happening in Clarington. Now, when we talk about Niagara County, would Hamilton be the closest pollution emitting city to where we are, or are there other nuclear plants anywhere near us that we should be made aware of?
Yes, as far as I know, the closest, as far as I know, there's 3 nuclear facilities in Ontario. It's kind of going back a little ways. That's certainly not the industry we're in, but there's Pickering, which I think is going towards decommissioning. There's Darlington Nuclear, which is a little bit further in Clarington, and then there's Bruce Power, kind of near Kincardine. So I'd have to kind of look on a map, but I think Pickering is probably the closest, particularly kind of as the crow flies across the lake.
Okay, so I think they say that as long as you are not within the 30-kilometer catchment area of the Pickering station, you wouldn't be so much impacted. Those that are within the 30-kilometer area are more likely to be impacted. So when you said it's going into commissioning, are they trying to shut it down, or are they trying to encourage it to stay? I'm not sure what you meant by that.
Decommissioning, and I can't say I'm an expert on the nuclear industry. It's just kind of what I recall reading. I think the Pickering is going towards decommissioning, which is shutting down. It's certainly a relatively old plant, so it's probably on its last legs anyway, but I can't say for certain.
Okay, that's good. So
also, if you're concerned about safety from the nuclear plant, please again email me. I'll show you how to get a hold of, I believe it's potassium iodide. They're required to provide tablets to everybody who emails them requesting it, should there ever be a nuclear malfunction of some sort. So,
well, we might need them if Russia decides to become nuclear in the war with Ukraine. So I guess that would impact the world globally. I'm just guessing it might, right?
I mean, yeah, for sure.
Okay. And are there any other types of polluting, emitting factories or stations anywhere close to Thorold or Niagara that we should be made aware of? Or is the only one?
Yeah, there is. So if we're talking nuclear, I think those are the only three in the province. If we're talking other emissions, there's an emission inventory that the Ministry of the Environment keeps that kind of shows different priority air pollutants and other emissions based on where they come from. So if you email Galen, he might be able to dig that out for you.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Perfect. Another question from JB that I'm going to just jump on for you, Andrew. He asked that our website mentions potential use of digestate as a feedstock, and are we considering it here? The answer to that is no. Our system will run either on organic digested waste, such as we are doing in California, or a biosolid or a wood. It cannot be all three, as the system will be configured for one of the three. And in Thorold, we are installing kilns that will specifically handle woody biomass. And at present, that's absolutely it. We're not able to flip the switch and switch it from one to the other. And then your second part of the question, when the digestate's put through the process, are the nutrients retained or destroyed, and to what extent? Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but what goes into the kiln gets converted into a gas and then a solid biocarbon, and that's what comes out. So
Correct.
The nutrients would not necessarily be.
The nutrients are in the biochar that come out. So in a sense, it concentrates them. So, nutrients, things like calcium and potassium, phosphorus will all kind of be concentrated in that biochar. So in our project in California, where we are running on digestate, and as Galen pointed out, from a feed handling perspective and from an environmental permitting perspective, we're designing for one of the three feedstocks we look at. So in California, we are doing digestate. And so that biochar we're producing is pretty rich in nutrients, as well as some fixed carbon, which is how we have additional agronomical value and the ability to do carbon sequestration with that project.
All right, well, I hope that answers your question. Liz asks that she understands that Char is relying on government funding and grants, and that there is an unfortunate history of new energy producing technologies consuming a lot of government funding, but in the end not being successful. Does our business plan project when you expect to be profitable without government funding?
As soon as the plant's built. What I would say about government funding, so the previous funding that we've used has all been about fostering Canadian innovation. So how do we get it out of a university lab, which are publicly funded, of course, and into the commercial realm? Once it's in the commercial realm, we go into a different, kind of process. So, government funding that we're looking for to support, it's all on the capital side. It's not on a subsidy of output side. So it's not equivalent to, say, the solar industry when the renewable energy programs were first launched, where you get this big subsidy for the power. What we're looking for is certainly support to build the project. That support generally comes from government funding, but government funding that are loans. If we hit certain milestones once the plant is built, generally tied to things like greenhouse gas emission reductions, that's provable and inventoriable, as well as job creation. A portion of that debt gets forgiven, but not all of it. So we do end up having to pay that back as the project's operating. So we certainly demonstrate the business plan and the revenue opportunities to these funding organizations to give them assurance of when they get their money back, basically.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. As we all know, read in the press, there is significant mandates at the federal and provincial level to decarbonize the Canadian industry as a whole. And as such, there's a rigorous due diligence process in order to be an elected company, applicant or recipient of this type of innovation funding. So it is not a short process. We're talking, 6 months to 2 years, depending on which channel you're going through. So yeah, I hope, Liz, that answers your question. But again, we're very happy to follow up with further information. Okay, Matt asks us, has there ever been any complaints of odor from our process, even with it being considered environmentally friendly and sustainable?
So the short answer is no. Especially running wood, because wood doesn't have any odor and our process doesn't create any odor. So it's all contained. It doesn't create odor. Where odors have been a problem in bioenergy and particularly in organic waste, even for those processes, it hasn't been in the process itself. It's been how they handle the material. So it's great that the trucks get unloaded inside, but sometimes there's a backup and you have 6 or 7 trucks sitting outside. And obviously they do everything they can to avoid that, but it's really all around material handling. For any project, it's that feedstock material, and being as we're using a wood that doesn't have any odor to begin with, we're not really an odor generator.
Perfect. Well, I hope that answers your question, Matt. Erica asks, have we ever received any kind of complaint for our London Wallen operation?
No. The only thing close was because we're co-located with a biogas plant that does accept organic waste. We did get one complaint because we left one of our bay doors open, and under the environmental approvals, the ECA for that site is the doors have to be closed fairly quickly. Now, it wasn't a complaint because there was odor, because there was no odor coming out of the building, but that would be the only one where our operators weren't as quick to close the door as they should have been. And that's the one and only.
All right, this is a great next question. What role does carbon pricing play in our business model, and how will we capture value from carbon reduction attributes of the project?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question, and each of our products that we produce, there's an element of the carbon reduction attributes, the environmental attributes. So on the renewable natural gas side, you get a price for the gas, which is kind of market price, and then you've got a environmental attributes piece that gets attached to it. So you get a bit of a higher price for the renewable natural gas because it has that environmental attribute attached to it. On the bio coal side, it's kind of built into the price of the bio coal because the end users will really see that reduction, and so there's an ability to pay more for the bio coal because they see the reduction. But on the biochar side, when we're doing carbon sequestration through land application, there's actually marketplaces right now where you can sell the carbon reduction attributes. They're called corks. Microsoft and Shopify have both bought corks through some of these marketplaces because a lot of these major players that are looking to do carbon reduction have come to kind of see there's a little too much variability in doing offset projects, like planting trees. Like, they're very hard to validate exactly how much CO2 was sequestered in that process. But when we do a carbon offset, a CO2 offset through a cork, it's tracked, and you produce this much biochar, this is how much carbon was in it, and we know that's going to the soil because we're tracing it. And so that does create an opportunity from carbon reduction credits as well.
Well, thank you for that, Andrew. Just checking for further questions. If anyone wants to write or just jump on the microphone, we'd be happy to address that. Give everyone a moment. No need to be shy. All right, well, barring, oh, here we go. Paul says, apologies if the question's been answered, been running late. Are we using waste wood from the Walker landfill site? If we are using waste wood from the landfill, can you explain how your process handles all the chemicals from the contaminated wood, such as paint, glues from the plywoods?
Yeah, it's a good question and a good one to reiterate. Because of the need for us to control what goes into our facility such that we can produce the outputs, and that's where the revenue from our project comes, is on the outputs. We pay for the inputs, so we don't get paid to take waste. We need to take in fairly clean materials. So we're not taking in woods that have, contaminations like paints or glues or, treatments or pressure treating or any of that. The primary source of residual wood from the region that we'll be taking are end-of-life shipping pallets, and only the unpainted end-of-life shipping pallets. They get shredded, they go through magnets to pull the nails out, and that's what we run through our process. So it's of the same quality as would be used for making a garden mulch.
So does that mean that you could collect wood if someone drops off wood?
We wouldn't at our site because we need to make sure what we're getting is clean, so it needs to be collected appropriately, treated, managed appropriately. If we had a drop-off site, we wouldn't have, I think, the control to make sure that, other things weren't getting in, and we can't let other things get in, otherwise our products are unsellable. Okay.
Are there going to be future meetings like this one on Zoom?
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly happy, as long as the city of Thorold will oblige to set up, additional just general public information discussions. I'm more than happy to continue the dialogue. If there's any unanswered questions or, people who wanted to attend but couldn't attend. As we go through the environmental permitting process, there's an additional piece of consultation of reviewing those environmental prospects or permitting. That'll be part of consultations as well.
And just to conclude, I was hearing that there are land dump sites that produce methane in the Thorold area. I wasn't sure if they were ever brought to your attention, or if this is something that is irrelevant to what you're focusing on for the environment. If you have any insights on that, I'd be happy to listen to.
Yeah, I can make a quick comment, and one is certainly we're very different from a landfill, from a waste disposal site. But the other is that, in general, landfills are moving forward with gas capture applications. So they basically they put wells into the landfill so that they can collect that methane as it's being produced, and then use that methane to offset fossil natural gas. Most large landfills do, in fact, do a capture and reutilization process, but that's not the space that we're in.
So you're definitely sure that Thorold does not do that? It's not collecting the methane to be reused?
I believe they are, but again, it's not our business. Okay.
So that would, for me to address that question, I'd have to ask who?
Either through the city of Thorold, probably, because I don't. Galen can work some magic sometimes, but I don't know if he can get you an answer to that. I don't know if anyone from the city of Thorold can weigh in on how to address that question, but that's where I would probably start.
Yeah, feel free to email me. I'm happy to help in any capacity I can. So yeah, I'll post my email for you guys again, and we can take care of that offline. Paul asks, and Paul, I believe you are the local custom table maker. That's correct. You do some great work. Could we use wood from the cities or regions forestry crews?
The answer is yes, because that is generally a fairly clean wood source. It wouldn't come straight to us. We would work through a biomass procurement group that knows what our requirements are and helps us find the biomass. But yeah, certainly it could be.
All right. I believe this is a similar question for Matt. Do we foresee any slowdown or delay in manufacturing and processing of wood products from other companies, creating a problem for us when it comes to getting the wood waste and byproducts from them? Are there any guarantees you have with companies for it?
Yeah, it's a good question, because one of the things that kind of makes or breaks a bioeconomy project is sourcing feedstock. We are in an interesting time where forestry products are generally increasing. There's a lot of demand for wood products, while at the same time, the typical uses of those wood products, which is combustion for like burning it directly for heat or burning it to make electricity, are becoming less and less favorable. So there seems for now to be actually a pretty marked increase in the availability of some of these residuals that are nice and clean and capable of producing a nice biocarbon and a really nice gas.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Quickly, speaking of wood for fuel or wood burning, would a typical wood stove, like just a regular wood stove, would that be at all a hazard to the environment because you have to cutting trees and using wood? If you happen to have a wood stove, is that considered efficient for the environment, or is that considered a bit of a hazard?
No, it's a great question, and you can get into a fair bit of detail around life cycle analysis on what's good and what's bad. But in general, if you're using wood instead of fossil fuels, that's good. But you also want to make sure that whatever you're using is a very efficient combustion process. So one of the risks of using wood directly, burning wood directly, say in a fireplace to heat your home, is that it does create kind of smoke. So you see, black smoke or whatever, and that's particulate matter. Kind of a quick anecdote. My fiance is from Montreal, and when I went to visit her and her family in the winter, they had a smog advisory. And having grown up in Southern Ontario, in the 90s, there was tons of smog advisories from sort of the coal-fired power plants at Nanticoke and down in Ohio. But they always happened in the summer when it was hot. And I was like, it's the middle of winter. How do you have a smog advisory? And it's because you had a lot of fireplaces going and a lot of places heated by oil and by wood, and the wood was making the particulate that was giving the smog. So I guess it's a way of saying it's not necessarily a straightforward answer. If you're burning the wood in a very clean, efficient wood pellet stove, I would say it's definitely better than oil or other fossil fuels. But you have to look at the entire kind of life cycle. Kind of one more anecdote about life cycle and why it's so important. When I was doing my engineering degree, we looked at life cycle of switching from incandescent bulbs to compact fluorescents. And from an energy perspective, it seems better. The compact fluorescent uses less energy. But we found that GHG emissions in provinces like Quebec would actually go up because they were getting a little bit of heat from those incandescent bulbs in the winter. And when they were taken out, a lot of homes were heated by oil. And so all of a sudden they needed to burn more oil to create the heat. So I guess the point is it is important to look at the whole life cycle when kind of evaluating those types of questions.
All right, we have a hand raised by Ken. Would you like to address the group, please?
Yeah, I just I'm a counselor, Ken Sentence. I'm just can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm just answering the questions about how I can speak for myself, how I feel about it. I came tonight to listen, the same as everybody else. I like some of the answers. I would love for this technology to work. Listening to yourselves, it sounds really good for jobs, but I'm also listening to the other people, and I don't really have an opinion yet. I think I went a little too quick last time. So I like what you're presenting, to tell you the truth, but I need to talk to people like Liz and everyone else. I would love this to work, and it does look good to me. So that's just my opinion. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Ken, and certainly we're here to continue the dialogue, to continue to answer any unanswered questions that may be left from tonight, to help to keep the understanding, the information flow happening.
Yeah, I think that's important. Thank you.
Perfect. Erica has asked us, where are we getting our wood from, and how do we guarantee we'll have enough to run the operation?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Like I said, a big part of it is going to be from things like shipping pallets. Some of it will be from things like bark that's brought south, but we contract with biomass procurement. So we kind of have a contract with them, and they find the best sources of biomass in the quantities that we need and in the quality that we need. That's kind of the service they provide. Our service is knowledge and understanding of how to convert that wood, that woody material, into these outputs in the proper way.
I believe that answer should satisfy the next question from Dave about will be using any existing rail lines to transport the material.
So what I'm kind of excited about with the multimodal hub is you've got sort of three sources of bringing material in. We've talked at a very high level about using rail. It's likely that something like a barge would be more beneficial from a both GHG emissions perspective on moving bulk material and the ability to leverage our location here on the Welland Canal. So we haven't written off rail. The challenge with rail is if you're only bringing in 1 or 2 or 3 train cars, it's hard to get the attention of the big rail companies. We've looked at rail for a different project. So it's possible. I would say it's probably lower on the likelihood than some of the other transportation options, just because we're not moving enough material for it to be interesting for the rail company.
And if we are to be using trucks, how many trucks do we foresee coming to the plant on average per day?
Yeah, if it was just by truck, this will be part of the environmental assessment. So right now it's my best guess. It may change a little bit, but it'll be on the order of 4 a day type of transport coming in and out of material for us.
Okay, this is a question I'm sure you'll love to answer, Andrew. Ryan asks, does he need to be worried about the health impacts for the people close by the facility? He's really worried about off gas from stack output, such as contamination in the air.
So, sorry, let me just open the question box so I can reread that. I'm not sure I totally followed it. Worried about health impacts on the people close by. Yeah, so this, sort of as I was saying before, we are sending most of our product off-site, so that's kind of first. Second, we're not burning any of the input wood, so we're not creating any of the priority air pollutants, things like PM 2.5, dioxins and furans if there was contamination. Like I said, we're doing everything to avoid it. That makes a bad product. But if something slipped in, it's still not being burned directly. So there's no capacity for those things to be formed in the first place. So it's from an emissions perspective, it's a little bit of biogenic CO2 when we can self-consume some of our produced renewable natural gas. But there's no other contaminants possible because we're not allowing sort of flames to touch our feedstock as it's being processed.
Well, thank you for that. And to the next question, I believe we did just answer that one, but the location being on the Welland Canal, do we foresee this being a benefit? Do we anticipate moving products by water? Very potentially, yes.
Yep.
All right, well, we'll give it a moment and wait to see if there's further questions.
Just quickly, so when using a wood stove in an area such as, like, for example, an outdoor garage, can we use wood that is painted, or does it always only have to be better to use natural wood? Like, could it be treated wood or other types, or any types is okay?
From all sorts of emissions perspectives, so both PM 2.5 and other air pollutants, I think the best thing to use is like a wood pellet. If you start burning treated woods, painted woods, you will get all sorts of strange things coming out as they react, as they partially oxidize, so as they partially burn, as they totally burn. So I would strongly advise against burning any contaminated wood for heat.
Thank you.
Carol asks us if we can tell her a bit of the health and safety risks to the employees at the proposed facility, and will we hire a management team available at this particular site?
Yeah, so we'll have site management. We'll have employees on site as part of going through the next steps of the engineering process. We do two things. One is called an HSE evaluation, which is health, safety, and environment. The other is a HAZOP, which is a hazardous operability study. So we look at every aspect of the plant from, if there's a moving part, that really should have a guard on it to make sure that someone can't inadvertently get their hand or their foot or something stuck in it. So that's very much part of the process before anything is ever turned on, is really going through on paper what the hazards look like. As equipment is being installed, it's reviewing it before it's ever turned on to try and identify additional hazards and put in every mitigation that we need to make sure that everyone's working safely and importantly, everyone's going home at the end of the day.
Councillor DeRose, you have your hand up. Love to hear from you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the informative presentation. I had a quick question. You guys are the experts, so I'm going to throw this at you. I don't know the answer, but I do follow once in a while the literature put out by the International Energy Agency. They're a policy advisor to 28 member countries plus the European Commission. And their motto is try to ensure reliable, affordable, and clean energy for their citizens. So, and they've stated that people are puzzled about how bioenergy can contribute to climate change mitigation because burning biomass emits carbon dioxide. And it's been stated that biomass can be worse than coal. And in fact, it's supposedly true just because a bit more CO2 is released per unit energy from biomass than from black coal. And can you just comment on that and just give your expertise on it, please?
Yeah, for sure. And so that's primarily around power generation. And so in power generation, you have one of the big issues of generating power from burning anything is the efficiency. So you got to burn something to make heat. That heat then has to make steam. That steam then has to turn a turbine. And each of those steps, you lose efficiency, you lose efficiency, you lose efficiency. So I think, from that perspective, it's certainly not as advantageous as creating other products out of woody biomass. I'd actually love to read the report about how it could be worse than coal, because coal is pretty bad. So I'd love to understand the assumptions behind that. But from a power generation perspective, there are some efficiency issues, and I think we're starting to see biomass to power plants kind of changing their operations a little bit, but it's certainly not the type of process or output that we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. As always, we'll give everyone a few moments here. And can I just say thank you again for everyone attending and giving us this opportunity, as we want to maintain an open dialogue with the community. Erica asks, how many people will we be hiring? The facility, when operational, will initially be needing 10 full-time employees as operators running the equipment on a day-to-day basis. While we're waiting for a question, I guess I have a question. I hope the wineries in the region allow us to be a little more participating, as last time I wasn't able to get any bookings with my wife coming through. So hopefully summer 2022, things will open up a little bit more. Chris asks, when is all of this starting?
Yeah, great question. We're hoping to move the London equipment to the new facility at the end of the summer. And then it'll be sort of an 18-month process, plus or minus a little bit, but about 18 months to get the next piece built out to have our full system built and operating.
And next question on jobs, will our operators be requiring specialized training?
So kind of, and the reason I say kind of is we don't have any pressure systems, so we don't need kind of, boiler certifications or, any of those really, really specialized training. Is there training involved? Absolutely, around occupational health and safety for sure, around just how the plant operates, using equipment, a forklift or the like for sure. But we don't need a lot of the kind of tickets around, say, pressure vessels and boilers. That's a relatively low pressure system. We're not operating boilers. So there is some training, absolutely, but kind of specialized can be pretty broad. So I can certainly answer it in more detail, but hopefully that helps.
And Chris asks, when will it be operational?
Yeah, so ideally 18 months from the end of August. That's what we'd like to see happen. There's still a bit of finalized scheduling to happen. And, one of the big unknowns kind of for the last 2+ years has been supply chain. So, we've evaluated where our supply chain has some weaknesses or some risks, and certainly doing what we can to be ahead of those. But things are, especially in the last month or so, been really unpredictable. So that's our target. We'll see if we can stick to it, or if there's some long lead items that pop up, but we're still pretty confident that'll happen.
Councillor Decker has her hand up.
Hi, thank you, Galen and Andrew. I just wanted to say thanks for the presentation. It was very, very informative. And I'm glad that I came to the presentation tonight because I have learned quite a lot. And it's really great to hear all the questions that all the residents in the area have been asking. So I just wanted to say thank you. And I've learned a lot myself as well.
It's great, and like Galen said, and like I'd like to say, we certainly appreciate the opportunity, the city helping by lending us the platform to engage with the community, and certainly, I'd love to do more of this, as much as necessary. I love to see the questions. I do like the engagement, and so we're certainly available to answer more questions as we keep going down the path.
Yep, great, thank you.
Paul had a question which we have responded to before, but we'll quickly go over it again. Why are we leaving London for Thorold?
Yeah, it's primarily we're out of space. So we are operating in a relatively small building, and we don't have anywhere to expand to. The rest of the site, like I said, is an operational biogas plant by our landlord, Stormfisher Environmental. So this gives us a larger footprint to be able to expand the operations. And the reason for, I've got the chat up now, so I'll jump ahead of you, Galen, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for moving and then expanding versus just building a new one is it's much more efficient from an operational perspective to have everything in one place. The London facility that we're moving is certainly smaller than the expansion piece. Now, the expansion piece, we would be looking at producing 10,000 tons of biochar, biocoal, biocarbon a year. The London plant would add about 1,500 to 2,000. So it's a piece of it, but we want to operate it as kind of one group.
Yeah, I believe you've answered Kieran's question. Next follow-up question about wouldn't it be better to have two facilities? But yeah, definitely happy to address that. If you want to fire me an email, I'll continue that discussion afterwards. Erica asked, to be clear, no pollution of any sort, be it odor, water, air, noise, soil, etc. Yeah,
so no odor. We're not using any organic waste that have smell. And that's the only place that you would find odor is on the feed side. We're using clean wood, no smell. Water, correct. We're recovering, recycling water within our system. Any water that is discharged is sanitary sewer quality as if it needed to be discharged. Air, no priority air pollutants, no dust, no PM 2.5, no dioxins, no furans, none of that crazy stuff. On a noise side, we did noise testing right beside the noisiest element of our system, which is a fan. It hit about 78 decibels, which is just below the level where we would require our operators to wear hearing protection. We still do ask them to, but that would be within a building. So any of the noise generating things like these fans are within the building, so they're not outside generating noise. And we don't produce anything that would cause soil contamination. We're inside the building. If we spill biochar, it can be shoveled up. It's a land application product as it is.
Perfect. The next question here, I believe we can divert to one of your local experts, but what is the most polluted nature element in Thorold or Niagara County? I would absolutely direct your question to Liz and her group, as they know the area quite well and would be able to address that, very, very well for that question.
Did you understand my question, or?
I thought you were asking what is the most polluted area in Thorold or Niagara County?
Not area, element. I asked for elements such as a nature element would be air, water, soil, etc. So if I was wondering if you guys would know the answer to that question. What would you think, or what do you believe is the most polluted element in that area?
Yeah, I can't say I'm informed enough to really be able to offer an opinion on that.
So he said Liz would know, or I don't know if, but anyways, she could let us know if she does.
Thank you for that. Matt thanks us for hosting the public information session for the residents in the surrounding area. Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for participating tonight. We're very happy to engage with the community and want to continue to do so. Well, again, we'll give it a moment here, and if there's more questions, we're happy to stay. If not, like I've said many times tonight, please reach out to me at any point, and we'll respond in a timely manner to each and every one of your questions. Is this a business that would grow larger? That's a great question. Andrew?
Yeah, certainly we're targeting growth. I know there's a question about Kirkland Lake, so we've identified other regions and communities where kind of the conditions are right for this type of operation. In Thorold specifically, I'd love to see, so in Thorold specifically, from an equipment plant size, we're going to be kind of constrained with the infrastructure and kind of the building that we're in, and the rest of that site is being developed, and it's pretty cool to see all that development happening when we come to the site. So from a throughput perspective, we won't have much opportunity to grow that part in Thorold. We would love for Thorold to be kind of the demonstration, the facility that we could bring people around to. Certainly the ability to have some process engineers working close to the facility, so they can come, see it as they're doing engineering work and design for additional facilities, I think would be excellent. And we'd love to be able to see that happen. So from equipment size, throughput, no. From jobs, I'm encouraged by the community. Some of the other there's a really good history of strong engineering capabilities in the community, and it does kind of make sense in that medium term to look at housing some of our own in the community as well.
All right, Ryan asks us, will we have any dealings with Northland Power, such as renewable natural gas, since they use that to generate electricity?
Yeah, not directly. We would be dealing with the gas utilities, and then where they sell the gas is kind of up to them.
Paul asks where he'll be able to find this recording. Either contact me, or I believe the city of Thorold provided their contact details as well, and you can certainly find it afterwards. And I believe it's on YouTube as well. That recording live button in the top left. All right. Well, it seems like we've come to the end of the questions. We'll give this, I guess, another minute and then wrap it up for tonight and make ourselves available for future communication through email.
Yeah, maybe we can just ask anyone who's in the midst of typing to just kind of raise your hand through the Zoom platform, just so we make sure we're not going to cut off before your question comes across. That'd be great.
Mhm. All right, well, I will leave this to Andrew to thank everybody on our behalf and, part ways from this wonderful night.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Galen, thanks for moderating. City of Thorold, all the councilors here tonight, appreciate the opportunity to leverage your platform, to be able to reach some of the community members, everyone who participated and asked all the great questions. I do appreciate the dialogue. I do appreciate the questions. We're certainly more than willing to do another session, be it virtual or, hopefully someday more in person would be great. And we'll kind of leave it at that to say, thanks again for the time and the opportunity to tell the story a bit more tonight.
All right, well, thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to, I believe I have the ability. No. The City of Thorold will have to be the one to end the meeting officially, but thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, thanks.